Okay, we had a nice snowstorm here in Middle Tennessee, early January 2024, and going to take a look at the Evergreen collection to see how everything looks in the snow, see how it's holding up to snow loading. First off, we have some trees that don't care about snow loading. That's the bald cypress on the left there and the dawn redwood on the right. Those are deciduous conifers that lose their needles in the wintertime. And there's our native eastern red cedar, which I would say in general does a somewhat poor job of withstanding snow loading, although in this case seems to be holding up pretty good. If this had been an ice storm, the story might have been different. The good news is that I kept it as a single trunk tree, and I believe if you grow your Juniperus virginiana as a single trunk tree, you really minimize the chances of major snow and ice damage. Next we have the loblollies, Pinus taeta. It does grow in parts of Tennessee. Doing very well. These have been in the ground for, I guess, about 6 years or so. And they started off as just saplings, and now they're maybe more than 30 feet tall. And they generally do a pretty good job of withstanding the snow. Taking a look down further into the collection, we'll get a closer look here, but just letting you survey the scene. Kind of hard to see everything because it's white on white, but here in the middle center screen we have the spruce pine, Pinus glabra, and right next to that, Pinus virginiana, also native to Middle Tennessee. And then right behind that we have some Berkeyii red cedars, which are also Juniperus virginiana with a different foliage color and branching structure. These are not mine, but the neighbor has a nice kind of tall hedgerow of Juniperus occidentalis, northern white cedar, looking really good. And there's the Berkeyiis there, and right here is my little Pinus strobus eastern white pine, slightly bent over at the top, but that's not a problem. And that's the Japanese plum yew, Cephalotexus harringtonia. And what I wanted to show you on the backside here is this blue atlas cedar, Cedrus atlantica, glauca cultivar, doing very well with snow loading, no problem. And I bet that its native range in the mountains of Morocco gets plenty of wet snows, maybe ice storms as well, so should be pretty strong. And a couple of Norway spruces here. They always look great in the snow. And there's just a general look down at a planting of Thuja green giants and Leland cypresses there along that fence line, inside the fence. Here I have some large Arizona cypress, Cupressus arizonica here. Here's a closer look at that Cupressus arizonica foliage. You can see it's the bluish foliage, and the tree generally holds up well to ice and snow. Not really leaning, maybe leaning ever so slightly, but nothing major. Actually there's a little leaning at the top of that one, but probably not a problem. Now the other cultivar of the species, Carolina sapphire, which is a lot more common in the horticultural trade, has major problems with ice and snow loading. But I bet this one will bounce back up. Probably the only reason it's leaning the way it is because most of the foliage is facing away from these Leland cypress trees behind it. There's Elaeagnus pungens, silverberry, you can see, broadleaf evergreen. And right here we have the Lijiang spruce, native to southern China. Looks really good in the snow, no problems. And you can see the Vanderwolf pyramid, Pinus flexilis, is a little weighted down. The branches are drooping a little, but not a problem for this tree that's used to heavy snows in the Rockies of western U.S. This is the Nikko fir, Abies homolepis, native to the mountains of Japan. So no surprise that it does well in the snow. Nordman fir, Abies nordmanniana. And back there, the little one is the Black Hill spruce. And right next to that we have the Momi fir, also from Japan. looking pretty good. The top up there, there was a freeze a couple years ago that damaged the leader, and now I've got multiple branches trying to be the leader at the top, so I'm going to have to get on a ladder this spring and do some major pruning up there to make sure there's only one leader during the growing season of 2025. Here's the Norway spruces, and they always look pretty amazing in the snow. Hard to believe it's Tennessee when you look at a scene like this, but it does get cold and snowy here, even though it's incredibly hot and humid in the summertime. And peeking up over the top in the distance, you can see a couple more loblollies. And then in this little section, I have a wide variety of hollies, which have no trouble. But I want to take a closer look at the incense cedar here. Looking pretty good. Of course, incense cedar grows in the Sierra Nevada, a region of the U.S. well renowned for its extreme snowfall. So no surprise that it holds up pretty good. This is my largest Edith Bogue magnolia. And just to let you know, the cold weather associated with this snowstorm has not been extreme at all. In fact, it's right at freezing right now. So 32 Fahrenheit, 0 Celsius, and it really hasn't been much below that during the entire storm. Now, the days preceding that were a little bit lower, but so far this winter we have not had anything really what I would call extreme. So the broadleaf evergreens have not been severely tested yet. Here's something possibly worrying, but I'm not really worried. This Thuja occidentalis, northern white cedar. This is the Nigra cultivar, but it had some branches that look like they're pretty weighted down. And I really want this to be a single leader tree, and this is showing me that I might not be doing a great job. Well, you know, it takes time for this tree to really establish its single leader growth tendency, so we'll see what happens. These might bounce back, or I may have to do some trimming here. Here is another closer look at those other loblollies. No problem. And my largest California incense cedar here, Cedars decurrens is the Latin name. And this is a look down the little trail, which is pretty obscured by snow, heading to the back of the collection. And those leaves you see peeking up there in the middle is that's from the Sweet Bay magnolia, Magnolia virginiana. And these big dark trees here, the tallest ones in the center, that's Murray cypress. And then right over here are these three identical trees that are now in the center. That's Deodara cedar. Cedars deodara, Carl Fuchs cultivar, native to the mountains of Afghanistan and Pakistan in the Himalayas. Or I guess Afghanistan's not really in the Himalayas, but approaching the Himalayas. They seem to be doing very well. One more Pinus virginiana, Virginia pine. Picea omorica, Serbian spruce here, somewhat obscured by the drooping branches of the loblolly pine in the background. And then there's a Sweet Bay magnolia, Magnolia virginiana, with some drooping branches, holding up pretty well. The pyracantha here, no trouble on this small and spindly specimen here. There's the very rare Daphne-phyllum micropodum. This one's kind of tucked away, looking very good. The other one I have that has more winter sun exposure, the leaves are a little scorched, but I think it'll pull through no problem. And there's the Spanish fir, Abies pinsapo. And then right here, pretty rare tree, Taxus floridana, the Florida yew, which has had no trouble with the cold weather. Obviously it came from a much more northern location, pre-ice age, so no trouble with cold hardiness. And that's the same story with a couple other plants from Florida here. The Florida anise, Elysium floridana, pretty well protected under a layer of snow, but you can see that doesn't matter anyway because the leaves are all green here. even though it's been in the teens Fahrenheit. And I'm not going to bother working my way back that far because I don't want to stress the branches that are weighted down. So I'll just let you know there's not much else to see back there, other than maybe the Chinese hemlock, which I've seen in a snowstorm before. It has no problems. Let's get a closer look at the deodar cedars. Okay, here's the deodar cedar section. I always love these trees. As a reminder, the Carl Fuchs cultivar does have sort of a bluish cast to the foliage, but it's really hard to tell when your only reference color is white, so you'll have to take my word for it. Really beautiful trees here. There's a giant Murray cypress there. Another view of the collection here from this angle. And let's take a look from this side as well. You know, looks like a lot of white, actually. Can't really tell much other than there's some conifers planted in there. Okay, this tree here in the foreground is the Atlantic white cedar, Chemacypris thyoides. And very recently I was somewhat pessimistic about its outlook because it does get pretty thin, pretty sparse in terms of foliage. As you can see, you can basically see right through the tree. But it is fairly fast growing, and the upshot of that is that it can't really be weighted down by snow because there's just not enough foliage to collect the snow. So from a snow loading perspective, being sparse really works for this tree, and I'm hoping that that's a good sign in terms of long-term survivability. So we'll see, but it does lose its needles in the fall, which a lot of conifers do. Not all of them, just the prior year's growth. So we're going to wait and see. I really have no frame of reference for whether or not this Atlantic white cedar is doing well or not, because I've never grown it and no one ever really grows it around here, so we'll just find out. But as of now, from a snow load perspective, doing really well. Checking on a couple of broadleaf evergreens, the Prague viburnum has drooping leaves that pretty well shed the snow. This pyracantha here, a little bit weighted down. Portuguese laurel also has drooping leaves that really shed a lot of the snow. But the Elysium parviflorum here, Ocala anise, is kind of weighted down and leaning pretty badly, but I bet it'll bounce back. In terms of cold tolerance, no problems with any of them so far. As I mentioned, hasn't really been that cold. I don't know if you can tell, but this Leland cypress is leaning a little there, but nothing overly dramatic. And no problem at all with this giant row of Evergreen giants. They really are getting tall, and they really have not slowed down growing. They get, I would say, at least 3 feet a year vertical every year. Probably approaching 30 feet up there maybe on the tallest one.